welcome everybody. My name is Tanyelu E. Aloy. I'm sitting here with my dad and former coach, Ta'alo Aloy. Say hi, Dad.
Hello, everyone.
And today we're just here to kind of talk about our new project that we're working on. This is a podcast. We're working on a name, but right now we really like Tea Time because we both just so happen to go by the name T. Dad, you kind of want to tell them what this podcast is?
So the idea that you came up with the other day was to create a podcast where we're following a few of the students that are being recruited to go move on to college right now. And I think it'd be also helpful that we move on, and because we're such a big football family, that we carry something that we can give the people a voice. You know, having that we just had a NFL draft and all that stuff that that went on, and watching guys on media, on NFL media, evaluating talent and kind of giving their perspective of players and who they thought they should go first and second, third rounds and so on forth. We want to be able to come out here and be able to give the people, fans, because there's a lot of fans out there that don't get paid any type of money. We know that, right? But their perspective is just as well, and just as, they make good points. So if we open up a podcast and be able to focus on something where we can bring on fans of different teams and football fans in general, we can give them a voice where they can come on and they can talk about, how they felt about their draft with the teams that they root for and what they see, from a fan's point of view.
Yeah, and that's very important because, you have all these people, these analysts that get paid millions of dollars, but they still kind of say things that are pretty biased. We're talking to these fans that, they do probably just as much work, even more, and they do it for free. Simply because they like the teams, they love the teams, And no other podcast that you'll find out there can cover not only professional and college. We also cover high school talent that's coming out. So, say you have a certain player that you like that may be local, just has a lot of talent. Say you got a kid that you think can go pro. We'll follow that kid. We can track them all the way up until the time that they make their first impact as a high schooler, all the way up until they get drafted, if that is their path. So, that's one of the things that we think is very unique about this project. A little bit of background about this is that I'm a broadcast journalist major at my college, Wayne State University, and this is just a passion project of mine, something that I wanted to work on. And for my dad, he just really, he thinks that it's really important to get fan opinions because we matter too. So. Moving forward, we're going to be talking to a lot of local fans. We're going to be talking to other fans that have very good standpoints, very good insights on what's going on in the league and college football, and even here in high school level as well. We might be talking to a couple of former players, but that's up to how we're feeling. And we'll be also getting plenty of players that are in right now. Starting with some of the local recruits. We have so many contacts, and we're just really excited to get to use those. Anything else?
Yes, it's huge when we're able to track and follow kids in their path. Washington football has been growing in the last 20 years since I've moved from California, and being able to witness football in the state of Washington. We've come from a one system football to now we have different systems. When we go to a football game at the high school level, we're seeing different systems of defense and offenses. We're not just seeing one particular offense where back 20 years ago we would go to, 3-4 different games and both teams are running a wing team.
Yeah.
Nowadays we're running into a spread, an option, power, spread. There's different. There's actually different offenses that are out there now, which is growing the sport here in our state. And having some guys that have grown up like yourself here in our state of Washington, being able to be successful and moving on to the next level, to the college level, is a good thing. And being part of youth football and bringing up some of these kids, and a lot of them we're seeing the fruits of that labor, that they're putting in, and they're moving on to the college level. They're going D1, D2, D3. Some, end up in JUCO, but they're able to live their dream and move on to the next level. And so it'd be nice to be able to track some of those guys. Just today we're informed that the number one recruit in the class of 26 here in the state of Washington is just committed to stay in Washington and play for the University of Washington, which is a huge thing because just 5 years ago we had the number one talents here in Washington were leaving and going to Ohio State. We're leaving and going down to California to go to USC, but yet we have a college right here in the middle of Seattle that's serving our community, but they're leaving, leaving to go elsewhere so their talent can be broadcast at a higher level. But Washington football is growing so much so that now we're seeing recruiters coming in and recruiting our kids at a super young age, where guys are getting offers from 8th grade, guys are getting offers 9th, 10th grade. They're not waiting until at the end of their high school years to finally get something. Now recruiters are like flooding the market here in Washington because of the growth of football that we have. And having the connections that we have with all some of these players, we'll be able to reach out and talk to them.
Yeah, and that's what's most important is this state in particular. I feel like a lot of people, they tend to gloss over us as if we don't have as much talent as, say, California, Florida, or Texas. But some of our top recruits, even some kids that may be only considered 3 stars, not even 4 stars, they can compete with some of those kids out there. I mean, if you can have kids that are constantly coming out of schools like Mater Dei, why not have kids coming out of schools like O'Dea or Eastside Catholic? And we have in more recent years, but I think with enough coverage, we can really get the ball moving on Washington being seen as kind of a national recruiting space. And I think it all kind of harkens back, you look back at the history, I think it really started with Bellevue, when they took the wing T style out to California and they beat De La Salle. It really kind of started the ball rolling. And you have all these training facilities coming out that then kind of pushed it. Iron sharpens iron. I think the first one was FSP, who happened to be started by a Bellevue alumni, Tracy Ford. So you started having people coming out as well, like Reggie Jones with Air, and then eventually DeQuinn Evans with Gridiron. And now you're getting all kinds of kids from all 3 of those programs who are just making huge impacts. We have a kid here in the house right now who happened to be with Gridiron since he was in
6th grade.
6th grade, and now look, he's a freshman. He's been offered by UW, and they love the kid. And you see another one as well who's been training with DeQuinn Evans since he was 8. Aiden Havili, he's one of the top recruits in his class. And I just feel like that's, and not just in the state, in the country, both of those kids that I just mentioned. So that's why I wanted to have this project that we're working on, so we can kind of shine a light on all the talent that's coming out here. It's been a long time coming in those 20 years from when we started off with just these little teams out in these small cities going out in California and competing and proving that they can do it. Now we're having a bunch of teams from even the bigger cities, like Seattle, there's Roosevelt, Garfield, all those schools, they're coming out in the woodworks with these kids with so much talent. Over at O'Dea, you have Five, what was his last name? Seattle?
Yes,
yeah, Five Seattle, 4-star. He just took his visit to Arizona State. So you see here, we can have a place where we can put out the good word for these kids and show that there are other kids as well that you can find that have just as much talent. So that's what I feel is most important.
And keep in mind that we have Derek Coleman Busa as the number one recruit in the state for the class of 26, and he just committed to stay home and play his college football over at University of Washington.
That's huge.
And where I said earlier that just 5 years ago, we had the number one recruit, in the state, and he left and went somewhere else. He just got drafted, to the Indianapolis Colts.
Yep, 2nd round pick, JT Tuimola. And again, that's big for these kids. Seeing people that come from these same neighborhoods, these same cities. But if we can have more kids that can stay like they're cool, they can make great impacts in this community. But that is a lot to ask. But having the exposure is great.
Yes, and I think that we're improving in the state as far as getting the kids out there, and like you said, all the different programs, FSP, Air, Gridiron, AEP just had a kid from their program that Coach Alves trained since he was in 6th grade, and just got drafted in the 1st round last year. And also I think they had a kid go in the later rounds But it's such a growth here in the state with our young ones that are being recruited at the high level. So it's exciting. It's an exciting time for the sport. It's an exciting time for for all the kids that are coming through, because they know they don't have to leave Washington and go somewhere else in order to be seen.
Yeah.
Especially when 24/7 is based out of Washington. With Brandon Huffman, and guys like Taylor Barton and stuff like that, that's serving the community and being able to give back and and put these kids' names out there.
And the branch of the 7-on-7 organization, the 5-on-5 branch, they're very big out here too. They run plenty of tournaments out here. Are worth covering. There's plenty of good information that can be drawn from some of those kids that go there. Jacoba Doyle from Puyallup, he's been doing quite well at those tournaments, and just being able to cover those kids, come in right afterwards. Like say the Air Force's FSP one that just went on last night. That's a huge event that just happened, and there's a lot of talent that happened to show up there. A lot of kids that still need to be seen more, like Tua Stephanie. He had just received his first D1 offer from Portland State, but the way he performed after that game, it's really worth checking him out. To push him out to these coaches, and just because he's undersized, I feel like there's a lot of tendency to overlook that, but there's plenty of talent still to be found. And just looking at those tournaments, looking at these big games, looking at these training facilities, that's where you have to start.
How do you feel? A question for you, T. How do you feel about what role does measurable play in a lot of these kids' futures when coaches come out and recruiters come out and they're looking for a D1 player, right, to play Power 4? How big is measurable have to do with that part?
Well, for me, it's always first impressions. You yourself told me, that's the first law of attraction. When you see something that you like, that's what you go after. So before you can see the kid's skills, the first thing that coaches want to always look at is his size. Look at that. You see a kid that's built like a mountain. You want to go after that first, because even if he doesn't have the skill, it's easier to teach them. But I think if we can break past that, kind of look at kids that have the potential to put on time, have the potential to get strong and to compete against kids who already are big. I think that can draw a lot of success too. But I completely understand. It's hard to want to put your money on a kid that isn't exactly as physically imposing, as physically large, as good at taking up space. But that's the eye test, and plenty of coaches fail the eye test.
Yes, and so how many kids do you think that are out, that are being passed by or passed over because of, they may not have the size, they have skill sets, but they may not have the height or the arm length or.
Oh, plenty. I mean, you even look at the pros. You see Aaron Donald was one of those kids. He barely got by because the coach that happened to be down the street over at Pitt, the city that he was from, he noticed that he was talented. And all it takes is just that one chance. You look at Bobby Wagner as well, undersized middle linebacker, ended up being one of the best to ever play, in my opinion. Went to Utah State, not a very popular school, not a very big school, but he still made it. And some kids just happen to have connections. Like Justin Jefferson. He's definitely one of the best receiver in the league right now. And that was just off of the fact that his brothers happened to also go to LSU. He deserved it, but could he have really gone there if it wasn't for that? You never know. But all it takes is just giving those kids a chance. That's what matters. And if we can call out these kids, show that they have something worth putting money into, that would be mission accomplished.
So overall, the mission of the podcast is to be able to reach out, talk to some of these kids, keep track and follow them on their journey, right? And follow and see where they end up, and track the journey as far as the process of getting there, the process of of getting the body right, of getting the mind right, getting the technique down. There's so much work. And then what also be cool is following the process that the families go through of getting these, because these kids don't just get up and go do things themselves. A lot of them don't drive, a lot of them don't have cars, and just to be able to see kids and see how the family support plays a role in all their movements and every aspect of their life in order to be successful, right? So that would be something that would be useful to be able to track there and say, hey, so and so was always there for their journey. It may be a coach, it may be a parent, it may be a sibling. Because there's kids out there right now, and we coach kids, and we've had kids around us that didn't have parents, didn't have a mom, didn't have both parents, or some of them didn't have a singular parent. But they were still able to accomplish and still be able to go through the journey in the process, right? So being able to tap into those guys and see, hey, so who was always there? You know what I mean? And just follow that process, with the people along that were there to support,
And that's what's huge. The way I see, football is a team sport, and then on the personal level, you need a team to get by.
Yes.
Me and my brother, the kid I was just talking about, the UW recruit, I don't think we would have made it anywhere close to where we were if it wasn't for the fact that we had someone getting us up in the morning, had somebody getting us ready after school to go practice 2 hours away. So, just tapping into that aspect of the sport, the aspect that some people take for granted, the fact that, behind every great player, there's a set of parents, a set of grandparents, a set of any guardians that, or even just coaches that believed in the kid, that's what matters. Even behind the kid's success itself, you have parents like that. And, the kid I mentioned earlier, Aiden Havili, his parents put in so much work, put in so much time. If you look back at some of the archival footage gathered on him, little 8-year-old kid running up and down the hill, and his dad is always standing there with him. So, if we can tap into those stories as well, that's really important.
I got a personal question for you. How old were you? You're at the college level now. This is aside from, what we are trying to accomplish. But my personal question for you, what got you into the sport and what inspired you to keep pushing forward?
I think I know who this question is made for. Not just me, huh? But we'll get past that. It was honestly, I watched a little bit of football, and then, you, of course, me and my dad, you said, get up, we're gonna play some football. And that's how it was, Took me to the field on a hot day. There's an angry white guy with sunglasses on yelling at all the kids. I got scared. The next day I was like, man, I don't want to go back, but the inspiration came once, I finally put on those pads and I was running around. And it took a couple years for me to really fall in love with the sport, but once I did, man, it just took off. And it wasn't just that. It was just kind of hearing both myself and then my little brothers who started catching up with me, and then you, of course, constantly getting excited about the sport. I couldn't help but get excited too. The way you spoke about it was as if it was, it was the greatest thing ever. And to be honest, it really is. The amount of opportunities it affords all these young kids, or the amount of reach that it has to improve people's lives, it's great. I feel like it outweighs the risks. And I've given up a lot to the sport. But at the end, it's all worth it. So,
Yes.
I really do appreciate, all the people who've carried me, and then you, of course, for getting me into the sport. It's been a journey, but I just hope I can keep it going for as long as possible.
Okay, thank you for that answer, bro. Now, you said that you've given up a lot for the sport, going into the sport. And what can you explain what it is, because you said you've given up a lot for the sport, and what it is that you have given up, what sacrifices you have made to be successful in the sport, and what goals are you looking to accomplish moving forward as far as it relates back to the sport. Now, I already know what you've accomplished, okay? You went your journey through the high school. I know what you went through, but not everyone out there knows your journey, right? You went through some bumps in the road. You were able to battle back from injuries. You were able to battle back from a late injury in your high school career, and you were still able to, to get recruited to go to college. So there's sacrifices, right? and you said that you've given up a lot. So you elaborate a little bit into what sacrifices, what you've given up, what you've accomplished, and what you're looking to accomplish in the future, using as it relates back to the sport.
That's a lot to think about, but I thank you for bringing up that question because it's important, you know, especially for young kids that might be watching this or parents that want to get their kids into the sport or watching this. First off, it was my time. You know, there's a lot of times coming up through middle school, coming up through high school, where it's like there's times where I wish I could have just taken that day off, went and hung out with my friends the whole day, take the whole week off, you know. But you know, it was calling me. You know, I felt a calling to come keep going, keep pushing, because you know, like I said, it was worth it. It's something that you know, eventually I fall in love with. You know, the first time you have a great game, you know, you're hitting people, you're running around, you're flying around. It gets addicting to a degree, you know. And I just didn't want to lose that feeling of being great, you know. Looking out and you see a crowd of people that are cheering because you did something great, you know. Every kid wants that, whether it be in that form or another. And that was my form of power. And also just seeing coaches that were proud of the work that I did, seeing my parents, you included, you know, just being proud of the work I did. So that was my time. I gave my time to that. I gave my time to being successful in the sport. Another thing was injuries. Coming up after my sophomore year, I was training and, you know, I had a little slip up and I ended up dislocating my knee. It was a very bad injury. You know, there's a lot of cartilage damage and I ended up losing my junior year, my biggest regret. I had looks from schools like Idaho, Utah Tech looked at me for a little bit, but I just didn't have enough film. And that was a sacrifice I made, you know. It was a lot of recovery. I had 2 surgeries. You know, it was a lot of pain. But I kept pushing through it regardless. Because I felt that there was still time for me to make a difference. There was still time for me to be successful. And my hands as well. The amount of times that I've sprained, I think I dislocated one of my fingers once and I broke my hand in my last high school game. It took me out. It was really sad. Like, I did not like how my high school career ended at the very end. But again, it was worth it. It was worth it. It was worth the sport. I took it as kind of like badges of honor. You know, this is what I put into it. So I should be getting a lot more out of it. I think the biggest sacrifice recently was kind of leaving my whole life behind. You know, I grew up here in the state of Washington. You know, born and raised here. All my family's here. And I gave that all away to go play some ball out there in Detroit. You know, 2,000 miles away from my family. You know, I don't get to see you guys very often. You know, I'm here for the next 2.5, 3 months, and then right back to it. I gotta get back to fall camp. So I would say that's another huge sacrifice for kids that want to go and play big college ball. You know, you want to go play for big schools. If you live here in the state of Washington, you want to go play for Ohio State, you want to go play for Alabama, you want to go play for those big schools. Remember, it's far away. I mean, I'm not even going for one of the big schools, but I still say it matters. You know, if you're out there and you're playing your dream, you have this dream of college and you're out there doing it, it's worth it. You know, and as long as I'm making a change, you know, I get kids that, you know, I used to train with that say, like, they look up to me, and you know, that's what I say is that's the cherry on top, knowing that, you know, the work that I've put in, the things that I've given up for the sport, it's worth it because I'm giving more than that to my community.
Yes.
Someday when I come back and it's all said and done, I can look out on the new generation of kids that are getting out there and getting time out there on the field, and I can say, hey, I went through this too. I can help you out.
Yes.
You sacrifice a hand, you sacrifice a leg like I did. That's fine. Get back up, dust your shoulders off, get back to it. So, yeah, thanks for asking that. Oh, I forgot. For my goals, really my main goal is to improve. You know, I'm still a player at the end of the day. I don't want to be stationary. That's the last thing I want. And I want to be useful. You know, where I'm at right now, I'm a defensive tackle. If that doesn't play out and I have to switch up positions, if I have to lose weight to be a linebacker, or if I have to gain more weight and be a center, that's more reasonable. I'll do that. You know? And if I play my cards right and I put in all the work that I want to put in, and more than what I want to put in, hopefully I can move up. You know, because right now I'm at a D2 school, and I always had dreams of playing D1 ball. You know, and I'm seeing all these kids that, you know, I used to call little bro. You know, all these kids that are like my little brothers. They're moving up. They're getting seen by these big schools. They're getting offered by these big schools. They're committing now. You know,
Yes.
I don't feel like I'm getting left in the dust here. I just feel like, hey, I gotta get back into it. You know, I gotta get back in the fray.
Yep. You know, it makes sense, but you know, everyone has their journey. You have probably more obstacles and more. You had a more difficult journey than the next guy, right? You battled through injuries. You battled through a COVID year, right? And then you changed schools in your freshman year. You were COVID year where you didn't really play football.
I didn't even cover
Second year, you moved from a public school into a private school that really, you know, looked at football as a tool to succeed and move on to the next level, right? Your third year, you were injured. So really, your only full year of playing football was your senior year. And you ended up with an injury at the end of the year. So you're looking at the obstacles that you went through, and you said that you're looking at these younger guys are being seen by, you know, bigger programs. It really doesn't matter, right?
It does.
Because you did it in 1 year, right? After battling through all the adversities, right? You had more adversity than most people have had. Most people would have given up at some point in those 3 years, and it was just say, you know what, man, I think my path is somewhere else and not here. But you got to pat yourself on the back and say, hey, I am proud of myself. I did accomplish my goals and moved on. Whether it would have been D2, D3, it does not matter, right? Because everyone's goal is to go somewhere and play football,
Yeah.
right? To be able to succeed and move on to the next level, because most of us can't say that, right? So you have to pat yourself in the back at some point and to say, not look back and say, oh, these kids, because what you did was open up a door for the next kid, right? So be happy that you have succeeded after 1 year of playing football, because we're not going to count those first 3 years, because it didn't happen, right? You weren't given the opportunity to really play. All right, so pat yourself in the back and say, you know what? I'm going to make a goal to move on to the next level, and this is part of your goal. This is part of your journey right now, right? Everyone's journey is going to be different, but it's where you're going to end up. It's what's matters.
Yeah.
All right. So when we look at these other kids, hey man, you had a part in their journey. You had a part, and we're giving back now. You are giving back now by following their journey, motivating them, pushing them forward, right? Yeah. So looking back and saying, hey, I should have done this, should have done that. No, this is God's plan to move you in a direction where you can actually give back as you're going to school. All right, so pat yourself in the back and never look down and say, I should have done this, done that. Because you did it in 1 year, what most kids don't do in 4.
Without your school's help.
Okay?
Yeah,
So be
I
proud
didn't
of
even.
yourself.
I didn't even get into my high school. I don't want to bad enough anyone, but
Okay, so yeah, at the moment we're just going to take a quick time out
yep.
I
to
mean,
see.
practice. Like,
Yeah, I know.
what